Hello and welcome back to the Eyes of O Gaming channel for another game review. And today, we're going back to another horror game. Because why not? So what horror game are we looking at today? Well, I thought it would be good to check out Plague Tale Requiem. This is a sequel to Plague Tale Innocence, which was the first in the series. I've actually already covered the first game in the series, so if you prefer to start there, I'll make sure that there's a pop-up on the screen or links in the description or somewhere that you can check that video out. But today, we're talking about Plague Tale Requiem, this one released in 2022. So this game is published by Focus Entertainment and developed by Asobo Studio, which is also the same combination we had working on Innocence. What is Plague Tale Requiem all about, and does it still hold up today for the first time playthrough? Well, thank you so much for joining me so we can take a look together and hopefully help you answer the most important question asked in this review series. Is this still worth it for you? Let's get into it. As for the plot, if you're familiar with the first game, this is definitely going to feel like a direct continuation of that game. Honestly, if you are interested in the franchise and playing this game, I do think it's a good idea to start with the first game, as it will give you a lot of context that you might otherwise be missing if you just jump in with this one. But for argument's sake, let's just say you're determined to start with this one anyway. A Plague Tale Requiem is set in June of 1349, 6 months after A Plague Tale Innocence. As with the first game, the main protagonists are Amicia and her younger brother Hugo. And as with the first game, the events of this one will follow the siblings as they attempt to survive in a world afflicted by the plague of swarms of rats, which is all tied to the macula. With the macula, of course, being the hereditary illness or curse, which has poisoned the blood of certain families, and which is currently afflicting the younger sibling, Hugo. The game will have you traveling around to a few locations, investigating how it could be cured and what can be done for Hugo, all while navigating both the environmental effects caused by the macula, such as the rat swarms, as well as dealing with the various human factions which will be hunting for you. Again, if you played through the first game, it will definitely feel like a direct sequel in terms of story, vibes, environment, and general overall feel. As a sequel, and since I've already mentioned this feels like a continuation of the previous release, A Plague Tale Innocence, I think it's an obvious title to mention as a similar one. Also, as I previously mentioned, the first game has been covered, so feel free to check that one out first. I do think that the best way to play this series is to start with Innocence, as otherwise you may be lacking context as to what's going on or why you should care about the characters. Aside from just looking at other games in the series, I would also say that the Hellblade series has some similarity to this one. Mostly that similarity is going to be due to the emphasis on story in the game, and the way it will be constantly playing for your emotions. The two series as a whole are much more focused on immersive games with a high emphasis on story, rather than putting it all on the gameplay. I would say that the real difference between them is that Hellblade will offer a more cinematic experience, whereas A Plague Tale will be more of a classic-style adventure game. Lastly, I also want to bring up The Last of Us, especially if you played through that game in a stealth way. Both are going to have a focus on story, they mix in stealth with direct combat and puzzle solving, and there's some strong emotional narratives in them. They also both feature detailed environments with an atmospheric design. Another interesting similarity is the amount of character development seen in these games. With a lot of games, the character that goes in is essentially the character that comes out, maybe with some new equipment or skills. In these two franchises, the experiences really seem to have an impact on shaping the characters, and they end up being significantly changed over the course of the games. This is a third-person action-adventure game. You do have a stealth component, just like in the first game. However, personally, I feel like direct conflict is a lot more feasible and encouraged quite a bit more. The game picks up right after the first game, and the mechanics in the beginning feel very similar to the first. However, there are some new things that get introduced this time around. Of course, you've got your slingshot, and you can make noise to draw enemies away. And also, like in the first one, fire is going to move rats away. There's also companions who will come with you in certain zones, and they can be used to interact with the environment, such as using cranks or using their special abilities. which special abilities can really change things up, with different characters having unique skills. This is a game where exploration off the main path is a really good idea. You're going to need to do that in order to find things like tools for upgrades and that sort of thing. The sequel also introduces a unique skill system. The skills are actually based on your gameplay actions, not just plugging points into a skill tree. So the 3 skills that we get to play around with are Prudence, Aggressiveness, and Opportunism. They get developed essentially by how the player reacts to combat situations in the game. So as you might guess, Prudence is going to be improved by stealth and avoiding conflict, and will therefore improve skills relating to a stealth playthrough. Also pretty obvious is going to be Aggressiveness, which basically involves direct conflict with enemies. Improving this skill will in turn make Amicia better able to be involved in direct conflict. Lastly is the Opportunism skill, which is improved by defeating enemies with things like alchemical items or using the environment to your advantage. There's a few alchemical items that you can use, such as Ignifer, which is used to light fires, or Extinguish, which is used to extinguish it. You can also make use of things like Tar or Odorous. Basically, you get to craft these things by finding crafting components throughout level zones. Then, for example, use your slingshot to throw these as special ammunition.
Just stay focused on getting the nightshade.
Yes.
There's also going to be a whole new level added with Hugo abilities, but I really don't want to talk too much on this as it feels really spoilery and is much more enjoyable to experience them as they come. Personally, I think that the graphics are great and one of the best features of the game. Of course, this is 100% just an opinion, and I like to avoid things based solely on an opinion when we're breaking down the game. But just for a moment, let's talk more about what you can expect qualitatively instead of things like numbers and frames. So the game takes place in 1349, mostly in medieval France, so you can expect winding streets of medieval French towns, but also venture out of cities and towns into the countryside, complete with ruins, forests, coastlines, and some underground sections. There isn't going to be a ton of diversity in environment, but at the same time, it does feel varied enough to keep things feeling interesting and fresh. Graphics are really up to individual taste though, so just use the gameplay footage to see if it fits your style. So what keeps this game unique from others out there? Well, it's a story-focused action-adventure that really does focus hard on the story over gameplay. The gameplay isn't poor or bad in my opinion, but the story really does feel like it's the main focus. You're going to be playing mainly as Amicia, but also kind of as Hugo. If you played through the first game, you probably know what I mean. But if you're coming into it fresh with this one, well, for most of it, Amicia and Hugo are going to be holding hands as you move through level zones, which means in a way, although you're directly controlling Amicia, you're actually kind of playing as both. With the introduction of additional abilities, you do also directly control some of Hugo's actions as well, so it can feel at times even more like you're playing as both characters at the same time. Aside from that, there are new companions you meet along the way, and their unique abilities mean you can approach zones with a different strategy as you go. Now, you don't have full control over the companions, and you can't just decide to have a certain companion follow you constantly. They are mostly autonomous and join you at specific spots, but you can give them orders for their special abilities. Speaking of abilities or skills, having the 3 different skills that get improved by playing a certain way instead of just dumping points into a skill tree does feel unique and honestly more immersive. If you can go all the way back and remember something like, say, Oblivion, this is similar to how that game worked. In Oblivion, if you used a skill, it leveled up that skill. I'd say it's not as directly obvious as Oblivion, where, say, jumping a lot improved acrobatics. It's just more on how you approach combat situations that's going to determine which skill is improved. Personally, I actually tend to enjoy this a lot more than a skill tree. It just makes more sense. In most games, you're just gaining some kind of general experience, and you dump points into something that's totally unrelated to what you had to do to gain the experience in the first place. The way it's done in A Plague Tale, it's actually a lot more consistent as your playstyle affects your character's progression. In terms of performance and bugs, I didn't really run into any bugs or issues during play. Of course, that doesn't mean that you won't. This was just my experience. In my opinion, the sound is great, as was the case with A Plague Tale: Innocence. I like the music and background ambiance, the voice acting and writing is really quite good, and all the sounds seem to fit well and make sense. Of course, as with the graphics, this is all just my opinion, so I'll play some examples for you so you can decide for yourself how you feel about it.
To help us in Requiem before we had to flee.
They didn't know the Inquisition would come after us. They are ready to welcome us now.
Townsfolk?
I guess. How many are there left?
The elders seem to be doing all right.
Yes. They're solid, these ones.
Yes.
Hi,
Their faith
Goose.
is strong.
Yes, that will hold.
Look! They're climbing!
What? How?
This is so bad.
We get to that tower, get Boda, bring him back to Hugo and leave.
So now that the breakdown of the game is done, let's get into some more subjective things and opinions. Basically, just to get a couple things out of the way, especially if you're new to the channel, don't expect any number ratings or anything like that because I don't believe in them. The point of this review is just to show you the game so that you can decide for yourself if it's right for you. Nobody out there is going to enjoy every single game that's ever been made, and your own experience is going to be subjective and personal. So with all that said, I know that some people are interested in how I felt about the game personally and my own experience. So basically, I just want to give my opinion and if I enjoyed the game or not, but keep in mind that whether or not I enjoyed it, it doesn't mean that you're going to or not. You should make your decision on whether or not to give it a try based on the breakdown done in the first part of the review. Did I enjoy A Plague Tale: Requiem?
Yes.
Yes, very much so. So I really do recommend this game, especially if you enjoyed the first one. This one looks, feels, and handles exactly like a direct sequel should. There's no big rug pulls or subverting your expectations, which is apparently what many devs want to do now. But honestly, if you enjoy a series, typically you want more of what you enjoy. Of course, you shouldn't let things get stagnant and you should build on things, but improve mechanics iteratively or work on graphics, the sound, the design, whatever. But something that I think most people agree on is that if you come to enjoy a particular franchise or series, you don't really want to see them reinvent the wheel every time. The things that were in the game that drew you to the franchise originally is typically what you're picking up the sequel to see more of. So of course it makes sense to stick with what works. This game does just that. It takes all the things that were good about the first game and just iteratively improves on it. Some of the changes that are made are done in a more subtle way, and those changes all make sense in a lore and story way. For example, this time around, if you want to play the game as a more combat-prone Amicia, you can. It's not like she's going to be the Hulk running around smashing dudes in full plate armor, but at the same time she is a lot more battle-hardened now, and this newfound combat prowess makes sense from a story-building perspective. She's really survived a lot alongside Hugo, and with that, of course she's picked up skills and the ability to defend herself. And what's even better is if you don't want to do any of that, there's the option to play much more like the original, with more of a focus on stealth and avoidance. The truly great thing in this one is that it's up to the player to decide what to do. There's also other things that you can look at, such as Hugo's progression. However, I really don't want to go too far down that road so that I can avoid major spoilers for the game. The settings and environments really do feel alive in most places, and I appreciated the attention to detail in the level zones. I also wouldn't say that this is a long or really a super short game, it's somewhere in the middle. You're probably not going to smash through it in a single sitting unless you've got a chronic need to get through it as fast as possible. But it's certainly not going to be a 100-hour epic like some RPGs that are out there. This one likely sits somewhere in the 15 to anywhere up to 25-ish hours range. But of course, this all depends on how much exploring you do, or if you just rush through each zone as quickly as possible. I also really liked all the characters in this one, and the companions, their personalities and unique abilities, they're all really quite interesting. If you enjoy story-heavy games and action-adventure games, this is a great option. It's also good for the stealth players out there, as it's possible to play through most of it as a purely stealth character. So I hope you enjoyed this look at A Plague Tale Requiem. Have you already played through this game? Let me know down in the comments what you thought and if you agree or disagree with my own opinion. If the video was helpful or entertaining, please give me a like here, as it really helps me out, and consider subscribing to the channel. I post a bunch of different gaming content, not just reviews but also walkthroughs and other videos, and would love to have you join the community and help direct the future of the channel. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch today, and until next time, take care.
He's going to catch us! Keep running! He's too fast! We'll make it! Oh no! The tower! He's coming!
Ha! Bloody brambles! You're going too fast for me.
Come on, Sorcerer, catch us!
Hey, slow down. You'll exhaust our villain.
This is your tower. It's evil.
Doesn't he ever get tired? I really should get back to studying.
Come on, we had a long journey today. Please, Mother said to try to exhaust him. Be brave, Sorcerer. Your fight is far from over.
Your mother's going to wonder where we are.
It's been a long road. You have the right to stretch your legs.
Yes,